Welcome into Sideline Signal. I'm Andrew, as always, joined by Tyler. We have a great slate of games this weekend for both college football and the NFL, following up a wild week of upsets in college football last week. So, without further ado, let's get into some of our games of this week. How are you doing today, Tyler?
I am doing great. I'm excited for this weekend, and we have reached it, folks. We've reached the point in the season in college football where there's an amazing matchup. There's at least one or two games that define a season. Every single weekend, we're into the heart of conference play. It is going to be terrific to watch, and this weekend is nothing short of amazing.
Yeah, and it was the week that everybody on Twitter at the beginning of the season joked, if you're getting married this week, you're not a football fan. I agree. I'm saying glued to my couch and my television set this weekend. So, without further ado, let's get into some of the big games this weekend in college football. Starting off, the Red River rivalry, number one Texas versus number 18 Oklahoma. It's one of my personal favorite rivalries played every year. Texas right now, 14 and a half point favorites over Oklahoma, but I'll let you go first. What are your thoughts on this game? How do you see it fanning out?
So this is going to be an interesting game for a lot of different reasons. Quinn Ewers is coming back after his injury, so he's going to be starting. Obviously, Arch Manning did a pretty good job, I would say, filling in. But he'll be back. He's fully healthy. And then on the other side, we thought we were going to be seeing Jackson Arnold, but obviously Michael Hawkins Jr. has taken the reins as a true freshman to that Oklahoma offense. And I want to point this out because there was another true freshman that got subbed into the Red River rivalry that ended up winning the game for him. I don't know. Do you know who? Would you know, Evan? Yeah.
I mean,
Caleb Williams.
the guy who was benched was Spencer Rattler.
Yep. Caleb Williams made his mark on this game. This is where he exploded into like an NFL draft prospect, into one of the top quarterbacks in college football. And Michael Hawkins is going to need a game like that if they're going to win this game, in my opinion. I think Texas handles them. I like the spread, honestly. I like Texas to win by more than two touchdowns. Obviously, this game has so much storied history. The game I'll never forget is when Cameron Dicker earned his name Dicker the kicker, ended up beating Texas or beating Oklahoma, excuse me, and kicking that game-winning field goal. They're usually close, but I really feel like the talent gap is really different this year. And obviously, it's an SEC game, so this is a huge game in terms of conference standings in a packed SEC. But I like Texas to handle them. I just think that Hawkins is going to be getting a lot more than he bargained for defensively. And then I think Quinn Ewers will be able to dice up the Oklahoma defense, even though it has been improved under Brett Venables, obviously, as the head coach. So I like Texas in this one. What do you think? What are your thoughts on the game?
So the first thing that I noted when I was kind of going over this game is the differences in offensive efficiency. Right now, going into this game, Texas is averaging 513 yards per game, both passing and running. Oklahoma is only averaging 297. So for me, the key to success for Oklahoma, they have to try and contain this offense. I was looking through and I was like, who do I think the key player they need to stop is? And it's kind of a pick 'em on this Texas offense. You have to keep Quinn Ewers in the pocket or Arch Manning, depending on how the game goes, if they try to rotate because Quinn is just coming back. You got Jarrett Gibson and Jaden Blue as running backs who are both, it's a great 1-2 punch. They're both power runners. Isaiah Bond in the pass game, Gunnar Helm in the pass game. Plenty of guys that are just star-studded on this Texas offense. So to me, Oklahoma need to have a massive defensive game if they want to be competitive in this game. I agree with you, though. I think Texas comfortably wins this game. Like you noted, Red River games are always super competitive, really close games. I don't see it this year. I think Oklahoma hasn't been awful this season, but they haven't had that game where I'm convinced that they can compete. So, I would take Texas on the spread if I was betting this game. I'm not, but I would take them. I think it's easily like a 17-point plus win for Texas. They definitely will retain the number one spot for me. I think it's going to be fun. I think it's going to get chippy, but I think come down to its second half, I don't think Oklahoma has enough right now to be able to run with Texas the full game. It's going to be interesting to watch, though.
And that being said, I do think when we come back to this matchup next year with Arch Manning and then Michael Hawkins as a sophomore who's been in this offense, I think it's going to be a lot more competitive. Obviously, both teams can recruit. Texas is going to lose a lot from this year's team, but Oklahoma is going to be able to retain a bunch of their talent. So this game next year could be like a top 10 matchup. which would be cool. But for now, we're gonna have to settle with this one. It should be fun no matter what. I know I'm gonna watch every second of it, no matter what it looks like, if it's a 40-point game or if it's a 3-point game. So, yeah, one of the great matchups this week.
Yeah, it's always fun to watch it. There's never a bad time when it's a Red River game. But moving on to the next game of the week, the one that I'm the most nervous for, obviously being a fan of University of Oregon. It's number two Ohio State at Autzen Stadium taking on number three Oregon. It's the college football game of the week. Arguably is the regular season Big Ten championship right now. Ohio State 3.5 point favorites over Oregon. What are your thoughts? How do you see this game going?
This game, in my mind, is a toss-up, but I'm going to decide based on what I predicted. We went back to our playoff predictions. I'm going to take Oregon. I like Oregon, and I do think, and Andrew's going to touch more on this since he's more detailed into it as an Oregon fan. But I think it's going to be a field goal. I think it's going to come down to the kickers. It's going to be either there's two ways this game could go. It's either going to be a defensive slugfest where both offenses can't really get their feet, even though they both have the most, I would argue, the most talent in the nation on offensively for both teams, especially out wide. And then the defenses are good enough, or it's going to be an absolute show out, score every play, every drive, whoever has the ball last type of game. So I'm going to edge more, honestly, towards the defensive battle. I think that there's going to be a feeling out period. Autzon's going to be rocking. So even though you might think Ohio State has more talent per se, I don't. But if you're looking out there and you think Ohio State's just better top to bottom, the environment evens that out, in my opinion. But I'm going to be looking at these two guys right here. We're going to go with Jaden Felding, the junior kicker for Ohio State. He has only attempted two kicks this year, two field goals. He's made one from 30 to 39 and one from 40 to 49. And he has a pretty good, I'm looking at it right now. His long is 40. He hasn't missed an extra point. He has a pretty good percentage. He's hovering at 90% for his career. But like I said, his long is 40. How many games have we seen come down to the kicker having to make like a 45-yard plus field goal in a college football game? So that's a little worrisome for Ohio State. And then on the other side, you got Atticus Sappington, one of the best names in college football. He is 6 for 7. His long is 42, but he's been there. He is a junior as well, but he's kicked all 3 years for Oregon, and that experience could benefit them. Also, in his home stadium will help there as well. He has hit a 48-yard field goal in game in 2023. So he has the range. We know that. So I think this game comes down to a field goal. It's going to be wild. It's going to be rocking. One of the best environments in college football, probably for the season. And I agree with you. I do think it's a preview of the Big Ten title. So what are your thoughts on this game, obviously?
Yeah, and before I get into mine, I have to give a slight correction to you. Atticus Sappington transferred in this season from Oregon State. So,
Ooh, my bad.
and also it's all good. And then, so he's not our long field goal kicker, though. He's anything inside 40 against Michigan State. I think Andrew Boyle was his name, came in and kicked a 50-yard field goal right before the half. But yeah, I definitely agree. Before I go into some of my other matchups that I'm looking forward to, yeah, the kicking game is going to be important. Ohio State's kind of had a curse with kickers. And so it's going to be interesting to see because I agree. I think this game easily could come down to a field goal. Atticus Sappington, he's showing subtle signs of Camden Lewis. You talked about how important late game field goals are in college football. Go back to the regular season matchup between Washington and Oregon last season. It ended because Camden Lewis missed a game tying field goal with 5 seconds left. So, the kick game is equally as important for both Ohio State and Oregon. Both have struggled the last few years with the consistency out of their kickers. To me, one of my favorite matchups that I'm looking at is Jeremiah Smith, the freshman receiver for Ohio State, versus Jabbar Muhammad. Jabbar Muhammad was one of the top transfer portal guys that Oregon got in the offseason coming from Washington. He's had a solid season. He hasn't had it like a flashy game yet. I mean, there's not a lot of times he gets thrown at. He's had a couple times last week against Michigan State early on. He got burned on a 4th and 1, which got Michigan State into the red zone on their opening drive. But when we're talking about two of the top guys in their positions respectively going against each other, it's amazing. And you could look on the inverse side too. I'm really curious to see how who Caleb Downs is matching up against on this offense. Is he going on the tight end of Terrence Ferguson, who's been great but hasn't gotten in the end zone yet? Is he going to go against Tez Johnson, who's one of the fastest slot receivers in the NFL, or in college football? Sorry. Is he going to go against Trayshawn Holden, Evan Stewart? The offensive firepower for Oregon, it's going to be interesting to see because the secondary of Ohio State's been good. But I think the key for me in this game, which will determine who wins or loses, is the trenches. There's been a lot of discussion. Is Oregon's offensive line going to be able to handle the D line of Ohio State? Can Ohio State's offensive line, who has been all right, but I don't think they've been anything sensational. How are they going to handle Jordan Birch? If they send Bassa on a blitz, how are they going to contain that? I think the secondary play for both teams is going to be great, but we have to see who wins the trenches because if Oregon can establish a run game like they did last week against Michigan State, this could be dangerous for Ohio State. I mean, think back to 2021 in the COVID season when Oregon played Ohio State. They were able to establish the run game. CJ Verdell had 3 rushing touchdowns, and they were able to knock Ohio State off with CJ Stroud at the shoe. So if Oregon can do that again, I mean, Jordan James is coming off a game where he rushed for 166 rushing yards. To me, Ohio State has to look to shut that down. And I mean, yes, you can look and say, look at how stacked Oregon's receiver core is. We have to game plan that, but you equally have to game plan the run game. Because to be honest, Dylan Gabriel's been kind of spotty the last few weeks. He's thrown a lot of questionable picks. He threw 2 in the red zone last week against Michigan State. Michigan State was handled pretty handed. They kind of got away with an easy win over Michigan State, but it could have been so much more on the scoreline. So I don't know. I think personally the home field advantage and a little bit of bias being an Oregon fan, I think the home field advantage will help us. I'm looking forward to Shout being played if we're winning going into the fourth quarter. I think Otson's going to go bananas if we're up going into the fourth for Shout. But yeah, I think this is a really, it's a toss up. If Will Howard comes in and has a day, Ohio State could handedly beat Oregon, but I think it's going to come down to a late field goal. Hopefully, Sappington has it in him, but that's my thoughts. Also, interesting to note, this is the second time ever that Ohio State has gone to Autzen Stadium, and it's the first time since 1962. So, it's a matchup we never get to see. Like I said, the last time was 2021 when we played at the Shoe. So I'm excited. I love to see a top 5 matchup in Autzen. I think it's good for both programs. I'm hoping Oregon gets away with the win, but I think it's big for the Big Ten, and it's going to be my favorite game of the week.
I do wonder how Ryan Day is preparing for that noise, how he's getting his guys ready, because the only thing that I feel is comparable. I think Oregon washes the big house. I think Autzon's way louder than the big house. I think Penn State whiteout game is like really the only thing that comes close in noise. If not, like I'm not Penn State fans. I'm not saying that it's a worse environment. I'm just saying that Autzen gets loud and it gets raucous, and it's going to be sold out. And even though Ohio State has tickets, they're going to be in the top corner of the stadium far away. You probably won't be able to hear the band that well. So this is going to be a full road game for Ohio State, and they haven't played anyone too amazing yet this year. So, it's going to be difficult for them. So that's another key as well as you touched on.
Yeah, and I think honestly, it's a big test for both of these head coaches. Ryan Day's kind of been marked as a fraud. He can't get the job done. Questions on is he the guy to win them a national championship? I think it's also equally as important for Dan Lanning because, Oregon in the few years that Lanning has been here hasn't beaten a top 10 team off the top of my head. They've struggled against Washington when they've played. They've lost 3 times in the last 3 years to Washington. They lost to Georgia, Bo Nix's first season. So, to be able to get a top 5 win would be very massive for Oregon and for Dan Lanning. I think Dan Lanning will stay at Oregon no matter how this season goes, unless he gets a job somewhere else, which I hope not. But this is a staple win for both of these coaches that kind of need it. So I'm really interested to see, who has the bigger impact in coaching this week.
Yeah, and that's a good point. And this is a game that could get Ryan Day fired, in my opinion. If they were to lose this game and then lose to Michigan, I think he's done. So this is a huge game for him. And obviously, like you said, Dan Lanning's got to get that first big statement win there. So that's going to be really exciting. So we go from Andrew's Ducks to my Tigers here. Ole Miss is coming to town. Number 13 LSU hosts number 9 Ole Miss. So I'll pass the mic to you first, Andrew. Who you got in this game?
It's tough. It's tough. I'm going to go a little bold. I'm going to take LSU. I think it's going to be a very close game. But the way I look at it, the key to success for LSU is they need to contain Jackson Dart. How do you contain Jackson Dart? I mean, keep him in the pocket's the obvious answer, keep him under pressure, but you need to take away his number one receiver. And to me, that's Henry Parrish. And, looking at the LSU secondary, I think they can do it. I don't think that over the last 2 weeks, Ole Miss has done anything to, impress me. Obviously, they lose at home to Kentucky. They looked awful against Kentucky. And then I went, my bet hit when I took them on the spread, but I wanted them to go out and dominate South Carolina at South Carolina. And you can say, okay, it was 27-3. They handedly won that game. But to me, I wasn't impressed with that win. I wanted to see more. Obviously South Carolina has some parts of their team that are exciting, but think about it. That's not the same South Carolina that played LSU week 2. It really isn't. They're completely different. Sellers hasn't, been fully healthy since that game. So I wasn't impressed with Ole Miss the last 2 weeks. Same thing with Lane Kiffin, kind of like we talked about with Oregon with Dan Lanning and Ryan Day. I haven't really seen that much of a staple win for him at Ole Miss yet. And, same with Jackson Dart. I don't think that there's really, they're always ranked highly, and then they kind of fizzle out when they play the top SEC teams. So, being at home for LSU, I think is massive. LSU is a great environment. We've seen plenty of upsets at LSU. I go back to, Jaden Daniels knocking off Alabama at home. What a game that was. We watched that together. You were
Yep.
so nervous for that game. And, I think LSU can do it, but we have to see Nussmeier be the leader that this team needs. He's kind of shown a little immaturity to me. He hasn't been the most consistent quarterback this season. I wanted to see more out of him in that USC matchup week 1. But, to me, I think the home field advantage is the ultimate difference. I think they'll take Henry Parrish out of the pass game for Ole Miss, and I think we'll see Jackson Dart struggle this week. Frustration's kind of building. We might see some character issues out of him. But yeah, give me LSU in this game.
I am happy you said that, and of course you guys know who I'm gonna pick. I mean, I'm gonna pick LSU. There's not a single bone in my body that thinks that Ole Miss is gonna win this game, but not because of any other reason other than I'm an LSU fan. If I went into the game thinking that Ole Miss was gonna win, it would be miserable for me. Every single play would be disturbingly just sad in general. But I hope that it's a game like last year for everyone else out there that's not a fan of either team, because last year was amazing. The absolute battle between Jaden Daniels and Jackson Dart, it was literally whoever had the ball last. It was big plays to neighbors, Brian Thomas, and then Trey Harris on the other side, and then Parrish as well. The defenses were flying around, big hits everywhere. It was terrific. It was one of the best games of the year last year. So I hope it lives up to that. For me, my key is going to be two guys and their brothers. It is going to be West Weeks and Whit Weeks in the middle for LSU. If they are able to contain Ole Miss's running game and make them one-dimensional, as well as keep Jackson Dart in the pocket, as you said, prevent him from using his legs, that would be huge. And we've seen this. We saw this against Kentucky. Ole Miss does not respond well to adversity. If LSU goes up 7-0 and the stadium is rocking, let's say LSU starts with the ball, goes right down the field, scores a touchdown. How is Ole Miss going to respond? We have not seen them respond well to even being down in the score because that was the only time they were down in the score was against Kentucky. So that's a little worrisome if I'm an Ole Miss fan. And I agree with you 100%. Lane Kiffin might be gone if they don't buck up and make the playoff. I could easily see him being a Florida Gator next year or some other big time program, possibly at maybe in Ohio State if Ryan Day were to leave. So that would be this is a huge game for them because they still have to play Alabama as well. So this is just massive. And I actually they might have to play Georgia too. I haven't looked at their schedule, but it's either just Alabama or not just Alabama, but you get what I'm saying. Like big games on the schedule. But I like LSU. I mean, the atmosphere is amazing. It's deafening through the TV, which just tells you something. I mean, they've caused earthquakes in that stadium. It's also going to be a big day for them. They're honoring the 100th year of Tiger Stadium. So there's going to be some LSU legends on the field during the coin toss, stuff like that. There's going to be a whole lot of pageantry. So for LSU, they got to stand on business, get Brian Kelly a huge win. Obviously, got that win over Alabama a couple years ago, but we need some more. I need to see that Brian Kelly can win the big game, and then Garrett Nussmeier needs to take care of the ball. Ole Miss is going to blitz. They're going to come after him. The O line's pretty good, but they're going to get there. It's unrealistic to expect otherwise. So if he can take care of the ball and then also hand the ball off to Caden Durham, the freshman, amazing. He has been terrific to watch. He can do it in the pass and run game. It's going to be a key. So I see this game coming down to the wire. Hopefully, it's an offensive showdown, but I could also see where the defenses play like outstanding, just because of how big the game is and like how tight it's going to be. But I'm going to take LSU in this one. I'd be a traitor if I didn't take LSU. So I'm going to go with the Tigers.
I love it. And honestly, when looking through the behemoth that is the SEC's schedule this year, I feel like this game has been relatively overlooked. I mean, yes, we had, Georgia, Alabama in the regular season this year. We're getting the Red River as a SEC game, but this game, like you said, it was electric last year. And I could easily see it being like that again this year. And it could easily be which team gets the ball last will win it. I'm excited for it. You know, we had so many fun games in different conferences that could potentially make or break a team's season this week and honestly next week too. But we'll cover that next week.
Yeah.
I'm in love with it. I love college football. It's the best thing ever. But going towards our last highlighted game of the week, I will say going into last week, it was definitely a lot higher on my list as a game to kind of pencil in to watch. But obviously, USC got upset by Minnesota, but it's number four Penn State at USC. Like I said, they're coming off a road loss to Minnesota. And to be honest, to me, Penn State looked a little unconvincing in that game against UCLA. I mean, they got the job done, but UCLA is not really a good team if we're being completely honest. You've experienced it too because obviously LSU played UCLA earlier in the season. So disappointing from Penn State. There were some times where I was like, UCLA might get this upset. But they took care of business. Now they're on the road at USC. Who do you have in this? What are your thoughts? Do you think we could see USC pull the upset off?
So actually, I do. I do. And I'll give you one fact right here. I'm sure you guys have seen it. It's been all over social media, but Big Ten travel has taken a hold of teams traveling across the country. So teams that have traveled at least two time zones over for conference matchups are 1-8 this season. So you got to move from Pennsylvania all the way to LA, and the only win was Indiana over UCLA. I'm not even going to count that because, as you said, UCLA is bad, really bad. In fact, when LSU only beat them by 17, I was really mad. I was pretty upset because that to me meant that LSU was not going to win the national championship because they didn't beat them by 40. But USC, let's be honest. Last week, yeah, they played poorly, but Minnesota also played their best game. No one saw that out of Minnesota. In a game it was either week one or week zero. I think it was week one against UNC that they should have won. They didn't close. This game they closed. For USC, this is a must-win game. If you want to be in the playoff, you have to win this game. It's at home. And for Penn State, if you lose this game, you have to beat Ohio State. You can't be going into the postseason with two losses at this point, and expect to make the playoff. I'm going to take Miller Moss and the Trojans. I really think that this is going to be a great game. I don't think Penn State loses because they play poorly. I just think that USC needs this and they're going to want it more, if you get what I'm saying. There's no jet lag. They understand how important this game is. It's going to be a noon kick for them, which is a bit strange. But that's something to be said because Penn State's going to have to wake up off that jet lag at like six. No, sorry, before then, like 3 a.m. local time in Happy Valley, to get up for this game probably since it's a noon kickoff. So that could be also an advantage as well. I wasn't sold on Penn State against UCLA, as you kind of mentioned. And I think Miller Moss gets it done. And I think their offense just scores enough points to beat Penn State. And this, I honestly see being a classic like the last Penn State USC game we saw with Saquon and Sam Darnold dealing, and then Adoree Jackson ends the game with that interception off of Trace McSorley. A great game that was. So we can only hope that this emulates that. So I'm going with the Trojans. What are your thoughts on this game?
We're in agreement, but on opposite sides of the winner. I think that this is going to be a really, really close game. And I think the jet lag and the travel will definitely play a role. I completely agree with you. I think we've seen that teams that have to travel cross country from the East Coast to the West Coast will struggle. And that's just a fact of the matter. I slightly give edge to Penn State though. I think this is where Drew Aller really cements himself in saying, "Hey, college football needs to respect me. I'm a top quarterback." I wouldn't be surprised at all. I don't think USC's been the best at defending tight ends this season, so I think this is a big game for Tyler Warren. Again, back-to-back weeks of me bringing him up breaks my heart to say it, but I think Tyler Warren goes off in this game. But again, I think it's close. I think Miller Moss will still have that fight. Miller Moss is a really underrated quarterback in college football. I think he'll have that fire under USC's ass. And I think, it'll be really competitive, but I think just personally, I give it slightly more to Penn State. I think this is their season where they really want to prove that they can compete for a national title. And a game like this is one that you have to win, if you're Penn State, but it really will tell us who they are looking forward towards the playoffs and the end of the season. This is a big game for the resume. If they struggle, I could see them if they lose, if they don't make the conference championship game. This is a game where you can look back on and say, okay, well, are they going to be an at-large bid? I think they still should if this is like, let's say this is their only loss or, their two loss. You might be able to make a case for them. But they really, really need to win a game like this now that USC's unranked. If this was still like a top 15 matchup, 4 versus 15, something like that, if they were able to beat Minnesota last week, then I still feel a little different about it. I say it's less of a must win for Penn State, but right now, especially with them being unranked, and other top teams playing in the Big Ten this week that you'll have to face down the road, either in conference play or the conference championship, you have to win this game. I think Drew Aller knows that. I think he's been there long enough to say, hey, this is the game we're going to take control. We're going to fight through the adversity. If there's some bad calls, if we're gassed late in the game because of jet lag, if it's getting chippy, we're going to fight through it. We're going to get a win at the end.
Yeah, and it is worth noting, I forgot to bring this up. Obviously, Bear Alexander, USC's bestie tackle, opted out for NIL reasons, and he's going to transfer. But that could loom large. He is their best run stopper, and you got two backs on Penn State in Nick Singleton and Katron Allen. That's a 1-2 punch, probably the best, or sorry, not the best. Oregon's got a pretty good 1-2 punch, but definitely a top 5 1-2 punch in the entire country. So that's going to be interesting as well. And, this is where Big Ten meets Pac-12. This is the biggest, I think, kind of dispersity we've seen. Like Washington, Michigan was two different playing styles. But that was mostly because Michigan didn't have a quarterback. This one is pound the ball versus spread you out and pass the ball over the yard. So that'll be really cool to see. So yeah, I think that'll make the difference as well.
Again, yeah, and honestly, similar to Ole Miss LSU, I think this game's been overlooked, especially in this week's slate because of how stacked it is. But over the next few weeks, it's definitely a game that we could be looking at late in the season and picking, saying like, "Hey, this was one of the most important games in the Big Ten this year." So it's going to be a fun one. It should be pretty close. Before we move on to the NFL, I'm going to put you on the spot. We didn't prep for this. We never talked about this. Right now, who is your Heisman Trophy winner if you had to pick one?
If I had to pick, oh, come on. Are you kidding me? Ashton Genty. There's no even question about it. Until he stops averaging 200 rushing yards a game, you got to say Ashton Genty. I don't care who he plays. I don't care if he played Sister Mary's School for the Blind. It doesn't matter. If he's averaging 200 rushing yards in Division 1 college football, he should be the Heisman without a doubt. And until a quarterback really makes that huge jump and makes me notice, I was gonna say Jalen Milroe. If you asked me like a week ago, I would have said Jalen Milroe's up there. But I gotta go Ashton Genty. How about you? I'm assuming you agree with me, but I don't know.
I agree, but I have seen a lot of discourse still about Travis Hunter being up there because of his ability to play at a high level both ways in pretty much every single snap of the game. I think he'll be a finalist as of now, but yeah, 100% right now for me, it's Ashton Genty. And I've explained it to some of my friends who aren't avid college football watchers. He might be the best running back prospect I have ever seen. And you and I, we talked about this a few weeks ago, but yeah, he's up there with Derrick Henry. He's up there with Mark Ingram. He's up there with Saquon. I mean, right now, I'm sure everybody who's listening in has seen the graphics that have been made for college football games and on social media. He is almost identical stats to Barry Sanders the year Barry Sanders won the Heisman in '86 and set the single season rushing record. They were both around just under 1,100 rushing yards through 5 games. And the only difference is Barry had one more rushing touchdown. He was at 16 compared to Genty's 15. But Ashton Genty's done it on 30 less carries. We've seen a guy who's been sat in 2 games at halftime, rush for 1,000, I think it's like 1,082 rushing yards and 15 touchdowns in essentially 4 games because he was sat in the second half against Portland State and Utah State. 90 carries to 1,000 yards. He's averaging, I think it was like 12 to 15 yards per carry.
Oh my God.
It's unbelievable. And, for the people who are making the case, okay, well, yeah, he rushed for 186 yards against Utah State. I would say, look at the game against Oregon. He rushed for 196 and 3 touchdowns against the University of Oregon, who has a really
Yeah.
good run defense, really stout D line. He can do it all. He is the definition of a Swiss Army knife for me, and he might be one of my favorite college football players I've ever watched that wasn't an Oregon Duck. He is electric. I am definitely staying up and watching that whole game, 11 o'clock kickoff time on the East Coast against Hawaii this weekend. Yeah, I think it's all about maintaining the load. If he was at 150 carries, I'd be a little concerned that he would get gassed down the stretch. But he's on pace right now with his current averages to break Barry Sanders' record. And I think if he's anywhere near that single season rushing yard record, he wins the Heisman, no doubt. If they make the playoffs, give it to him right away. But he is an insanely good player, and I don't think anyone is near him right now.
Yeah, and two wild stats that I just want to throw out there. If you only counted his yards after contact, he'd still be fourth in the FBS. Are you
Yeah.
kidding me? And that's not even to say Boise State's O-line is bad. It's just the fact that no one can tackle him.
Hmm.
No one can tackle him.
Yeah.
It's impossible. It is must watch television when
And
that man is on the
if
field.
you're a fan who hasn't watched a lot of Boise State, but you've heard about it, I beg you to go and watch Ashton Genty's game against Washington State because he made a formerly Power Five football team's defense look like a bunch of toddlers. There was a touchdown run he ran, it was, I think, 30 yards. He ran through 6 guys.
Yeah.
And there was like 2 of them dragging along as he walked into the end zone. It is ridiculous how good he is. And my dad asked me when I was hyping him up, "Oh, who's his NFL comparison?" I couldn't give you one because
No.
any guy I compare him to would be a disservice to him. He's got the elusiveness and the yards after catch and yards after contact that a guy like Alvin Kamara had. He's got the power of Saquon Barkley or Derrick Henry. He's got the elusiveness of Saquon too. He is like the perfect combination. When they ask rookies going into the draft, oh, what type of, what would you want from each? If you had to make a perfect running back, what would you take from each? To be honest, it's Ashton Genty.
Yeah.
He is that guy. And I can't believe it. Like I said, I've been, completely shocked watching how good he is at running the ball this year.
Yeah. And the other thing is that he clears the last three running back Heismans by 400 yards or 300 yards up to this point. How is it not our like they should be mailing it to him now, honestly.
100%. 100%. I mean, obviously, we still got to see how Boise State fares off and how he does if he stays healthy, if he continues to run like he has. But right now, I agree with you. It's a no doubter. But yeah, let's move on to NFL now because, uh, We're showing love to both leagues. We're
Yeah.
not just a college football fanboy account. We love our NFL too. I'll
Yeah.
start off with you. We're gonna go through our two biggest games of the week. I'm sure we have some different games. So let me get your first game of the week in the NFL.
So my first one, it was staring at me the second I found out this game was being played this week. It is the 4-1 surprising Washington Commanders, led by rookie quarterback Jaden Daniels, my boy, but now not my boy, at the Baltimore Ravens, who have been hot. Lamar Jackson had his best game of the year against Cincinnati, winning that game in overtime, coming off a very emotional and needed road win. This is going to be wild, guys. I really hope it lives up to what we're hoping to. The Washington Commanders defense is horrid. Don't let Jaden Daniels mask you from that. They have either the 30th, 31st, or 32nd best defense in the NFL. That means they're either third to last, second to last, or last. But I expect Lamar is going to have his way, and really the key is going to be is Jaden Daniels going to have his way. He's been able to do it against any defense that has been put in front of him. Obviously, they haven't played any amazing defenses. I guess you could say the Browns defense was amazing, but I almost feel like they were so demoralized from having to watch Deshaun Watson go out there and shit the bed every drive that they were like not playing to their full potential. And that's not a shot at the Commanders. You guys smoked them. But this game is going to be insane. Hopefully, I hope it's back and forth and back and forth, and they don't even need to throw the ball. Maybe they can just scramble around the field. I'd be down to watch that for 60 minutes. But if I had to pick a winner, I'm going to go with the Ravens by a score. I think the home field advantage helps. The Ravens M&T Bank Stadium is always rocking. It's loud. The Commanders have not played anyone. Simply put, the best team, I guess you could say that they played is the Bucks, who they lost to, and then the Giants, who would have beaten them if they had a healthy kicker. And I don't care how salty I sound in that. It's pretty much it's true. Um, but uh I think the Ravens are just too much to handle. I think the Commanders come back down to earth, but I think this game becomes an instant classic, and that it really shows us a look into what the NFL is going to look like for the next possibly decade if both of them could stay healthy. It's going to be terrific, and the juke moves and the scrambles are going to be the best to watch. So yeah, that's my first game. It's going to be exciting for sure. Any thoughts before we move on to your first?
Yeah, I think it's something that you never really expect recently because we've seen a lot of struggle from the Commanders over the last, let's say, decade since RG3's left. We talked about that at nauseum lately, but yeah, I'm excited that we actually get to see a Beltway game. Be competitive because typically if you're coming into the Beltway game, with the Commanders and the Ravens, you're just going to pick the Ravens and they're going to walk. But I don't know this year. I mean, like you noted, this is the first defense that's truly, truly like really good that Jaden Daniels is going to have to play. So, I think we have to see Terry McLaurin have a big game for Jaden. Same with like Brian Robinson. They have to be able to support him because we've seen this time in and time out with Lamar when he didn't have a big receiver core. He can't do it all himself against teams that are very strong defensively. And so I think, that's ultimately going to be the thing is how can his support characters or, his support teammates help him out and get a win? Because if he's just going to scramble every single play, try to make these, hero balls, kind of like Josh Allen does from time to time, they'll lose this game and they'll struggle and there might be some cracks, but I think it could be close if Terry McLaurin and like De'Ami Brown have a good game in the pass game. But yeah, I don't know. It's the first time in a while it could genuinely be a toss up. I might take the Ravens too, but I don't think it's as far off as people think.
Yeah, me either. And I'm hoping it's not because I want to watch it since the Giants have the Sunday night game this week. So without further ado, though, what is your first game that you want to highlight from this week's NFL slate?
Yeah, I took the Steelers at Las Vegas, at Allegiant Stadium, taking on the Raiders. And the reason I picked this game is because there's a lot of things that we get to see, a lot of moving pieces. Pittsburgh's kind of struggled to move the ball the last few weeks, notably against the Cowboys last week. Justin Fields hasn't looked awful, but he hasn't looked great. Something I wanted to see more out of him. So looking at Pittsburgh, I want to see them more consistent as a team and not just as a defensive team because we know how good Pittsburgh's defense is. We know how good Mike Tomlin has them coached up. But the offense, I need to see more out of if they want to be like a deep playoff team like they could be. Their game plan has to be less reliant on their defense forcing the offense to punt and their punt return getting them into plus territory. So they either get a touchdown or Boswell kicks a field goal. We've seen that pretty much all season. It's literally been, can our defense get a turnover or keep them pinned inside their 10 to punt out of the end zone? And then, okay, Austin punt return to the 45-yard line. We're in plus territory. We're going to go now. They have to be able to do it better when they're getting the ball and they're starting at their own 30, 35-yard line. That's what they've struggled on. And then looking at the Raiders, a lot of moving pieces. Christian Wilkins just got put on IR. He has a fractured bone in his foot. I believe it
Yeah.
was when he was celebrating a sack against Denver. I think it was Janarius Robinson jumped on him to celebrate, and then I think the next play he went down. So he's on the IR, which is a massive loss for the D line. Obviously, Max Crosby's still there; he's still doing his thing. But in other news, offensively, they have a quarterback change. Antonio Pierce announced that they're starting Aiden O'Connell this week. We saw a lot of Aiden O'Connell last year because of Jimmy G just being awful at the sport of football. Aiden O'Connell came in. I as a Raiders fan, I'm still torn on Aiden O'Connell. I think he's shown some promise. There were some games specifically last year, and honestly, the few drives he had against Denver last week, he has some promise. The team seems to ride with him. They respect him a lot. He's had some really good throws. There was a throw last week. I think it was like 3rd and 10 out of the end zone where he was able to throw a perfect jump ball to I believe it's Jacoby Myers on the sideline, got 2 feet in. So he's definitely dynamic, but is he going to be able to be the future for the Raiders? I don't think so. A lot of scouts don't think so. There's been a lot of reports that they're pushing for Shadur in the draft. We'll have to wait and see on that. But looking for the game this weekend, I just want to see a good game out of the Raiders, win or lose. I want to see them give the fans something to look forward to because obviously they're going to rebuild. There's no doubt about that. But have some of your younger players shine so that 2 seasons from now we can be like, okay, well, Brock Bowers, his rookie year, had a great year, so I'm excited to see him develop. But yeah, I think the Steelers take it over the Raiders. I could see it being something like 28-10. But growing pains for Antonio Pierce and this rebuilding Raiders, if it's my opinion.
And there's a couple storylines or hypotheticals I want to put out there for this game that could make it even more interesting. So Russell Wilson is back. He is going to be the backup quarterback. What say you if Justin Fields has an abysmal first half? Like, how short is that leash on Fields before Wilson goes in?
So I think it's interesting because there's a lot that I think has to be taken into consideration. He's coming off a calf injury. There's a high re-injury rate, so I think you kind of have to temper his workload if that is to happen. Maybe a fourth quarter you put him in, but you also have to wonder if this would impact Justin Fields' confidence because if he gets benched and then let's say he just wins the starting role back because Russ doesn't play well, what does that do to his mindset? I mean, you can't have a quarterback, your starting quarterback, be dealing with mental adversity when you're down the stretch where you're going to have to play tough divisional games and you're honestly in a dogfight for your division and for the playoffs. So I mean, if they continue to struggle with Russ back, maybe you try it out. You say, "What the hell? Let's give it a go." But at the same time, if Russ isn't going to be your long-term starter for the stretch of the season, either just personal preference wise for Mike Tomlin or performance based, if he struggles in the games he plays, you're killing the confidence of your young buck. And I think that's the thing is Justin Fields has always kind of had to deal with that mental adversity because he got blamed for essentially everything for his time in Chicago. And yes, he hasn't played bad. There's been games where he, has shown why he's such a dual threat quarterback. He's able to get it done with the run and in the pass game. I'll be honest, I think a lot of the blame also falls. I don't think that Pittsburgh's receiving core is all that good.
Yeah.
George Pickens is the wide receiver one. He's young, but I don't know. I still think that they're a weapon away from really having a good receiving core. So I don't think all the fault falls on Justin Fields. I don't think he's played phenomenal. I'm not trying to, make excuses for him. But personally, I think there's a lot more wrong with Pittsburgh than just Justin Fields, and I don't think that Russ coming in is necessarily the answer.
Good answer. That's about as solid of an answer as I could have hoped for you there. My second one. It's not. It's like it's like seeing ghosts out there, like Sam Darnold seeing ghosts. It's not likely to happen. But do you think if AOC plays well this weekend, that like Devontae would second guess
So yeah,
playing
I
third?
mean, I've seen some interesting reports on social media that apparently Antonio Pierce has had contact with Devontae and they're on better terms now. So a positive sign. And some of the big media outlets on like ESPN over the last few days have said that they're it's been conflicting. Some are saying, oh, we could see a deal done in the next few weeks, but then some saying that they wouldn't be surprised if Devontae stays. I think it shows Devontae is much bigger fan of O'Connell than Gardner Minshew. And I mean, granted, he's had that extended time where he's worked with Aiden O'Connell from last season, but you know, I think he's expected to play this weekend against the Steelers. So we'll get to see how that connection is. If there's a good connection and Devontae looks happy, then potentially he could stay. But ultimately, if you're the Raiders, take the pick and the surplus of whatever you can get out of Devontae Adams because he's too good to be on our team. And I don't think the Raiders are competitive this year and probably next year. So just start the rebuild, get the picks to get it going. To be honest, I love Devontae. I think he's one of the best receivers in the league, but I think we're doing him a disservice, and I think for him, he needs to leave.
That's sad to hear, especially because I felt the same kind of way with OBJ at the end. I was kind of like, all right, just get rid of him. He's our only good player, but you got to get the picks. And also, breaking news, there's no way you would have known this unless you were looking at Twitter. Devontae has been ruled out for this Sunday.
Oh,
So he will
I
not be
didn't
playing.
see that.
Yeah, it
Damn.
was literally in the last 30 minutes.
Oh,
So,
okay. Yeah, my phone's on Do Not Disturb, so I haven't seen any of the notifications. Yeah, okay. I'm not really surprised. I had heard that it was kind of 50-50, but yeah, I mean that just plays more into the role that Steelers will probably take this game.
yeah, I tend to agree with you, but I'm still holding out hope because I feel like the Raiders have just underplayed what they should be, in my opinion.
Yeah,
Theirs.
it's frustrating, but that's just the way
Oh,
it
yeah.
goes. But enough about the Raiders. Let's move on. Your second game of the week. What do you got?
All right. So, in my opinion, this is the biggest game of the week for the teams playing in it. So, like the result will determine a lot down the line for these two teams. It is the Buffalo Bills at 3-2, traveling to MetLife Stadium on Monday night to face the New York Jets at 2-3. If this sounds familiar, it's because it was the exact same situation that Aaron Rodgers tore his Achilles in. A couple of plays in. I'm sure Aaron Rodgers remembers it, and I'm sure he wants to spell that and play well for the New York Jets fans. Obviously they just fired Robert Saleh this week. Jeff Ulbrich takes over. Nathaniel Hackett, sorry, excuse me, is no longer doing the play calling. What is going to happen for this Jets team if they end up losing this game? I have no idea. This is a must win. It's super early. It's week 6. You have to win this game. It's against a team that has run your division for the last 5 years, or since Tom Brady's left New England, I should say. This is a must win, but it's also a must win for the Bills, in my opinion. They did not look good last week. Josh Allen did not look good. They were clearly lacking a guy, a wide receiver one, cough, cough, Stephon Diggs, who torched them on the other side in his new Texans uniform. I'm going to need a guy like Keon Coleman to step up. They get Shakir back, which will be big. Obviously, he didn't play last week, which factored into it. But this is a massive game in the AFC East. It looks like the Dolphins and Pats will be nowhere close. So this is basically part one of two in the AFC East championship game. That's what it's gonna be. So massive game. I'm gonna go with the Jets. I think the Jets pull this one out and they get our friend Lembo all hyped up and riled up, and he's gonna go back to saying that the Jets are Super Bowl contenders and blah blah blah. But I think Aaron Rodgers gets it done. He is a guy that, when faced with adversity, he responds to it. I expect it to be the same here. I want to see something from Brees Hall. I think that if they get the running game going, that would be huge for them because I honestly think that at this point in his career, Aaron Rodgers should be a play action quarterback. You set up the run game so that he can start taking deep shots off of the play action. I think that works well. And I think that Garrett Wilson has a big game as well. So I'm going to take the Jets there in that contest.
I like it. It's going to be interesting to see if James Cook for the Bills plays too. Obviously, he's been day to day with the toe injury. Hasn't practiced much this week, but I could see it happening. I think there's a lot of growing pains in Buffalo, having such a massive adjustment, losing Gabe Davis and Stephon Diggs. But yeah, I think it's the typical interim manager bounce back win your first week. So I wouldn't be surprised if this happens. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of just we're competing between those two for the division. It's pick 'em, those games. Honestly, when Miami's competitive too, it's all pick 'em because they tend to split. It's like every middle American college basketball or college football conference, they all just split against each other, and it's just whoever does best out of conference. So, yeah, I could see the Jets winning. I don't know. To me, I don't have as much stake in this game, but yeah, I would expect some growing pains out of the Bills still, maybe some frustration out of Josh Allen, but we'll see. I think it's
I,
going to
I
be a great game, but yeah.
I can't overstate this enough. It is going to get really ugly if the Jets come out and lay a donut. It's going to be very ugly. You will hear boos. You're going to hear boos, and the locker room is going to be completely torn, especially after you took a guy that the players loved. The players loved Robert Saleh. And whether that was Aaron Rodgers doing, I don't think it was. Obviously, Woody Johnson wanted to get rid of him, but we could see a huge disconnect between the locker room and management. And that'll be interesting to see so early in the season. It's only week 6, and there's already been so much drama with the Jets. So it could get ugly for
Yeah,
sure.
it definitely could. Jets are such a hard team to read. So I don't want to seem like I don't care about this matchup, but I'm just lost because Buffalo's confused me too. It's a confusing matchup. I really don't know. I don't really have a good read on either of these guys right now. So, yeah, we'll learn a lot about both of them this week, I guess.
Yeah, that we will. So moving on to Andrew's second matchup. What's that second matchup you want to highlight?
Yeah, I went with Lions at Cowboys. Rematch from that controversial game last season with the offensive lineman. Oh, did he announce himself as eligible? Did he not? Ultimately cost the Lions the game. Very frustrating to see as a neutral fan, but Detroit's coming off a bye week this week, and obviously Dallas is on a short week after the Monday night win against Pittsburgh at Pittsburgh. But I really want to see how Dallas's defense plays this week, especially the secondary. We've seen the secondary be kind of hit or miss. They struggled a lot against New Orleans earlier in the season, but they haven't been at their best, especially because of how many talented players are in that secondary. So now that they're going up against a really solid receiver core and two good tight ends with Brock Wright and Sam Laporta on the Lions, I want to see how the secondary performs because these are two teams with something to prove. 3-1 for Detroit. Obviously, they had their bye week, and then 3-2 for Dallas. Dallas lost to Baltimore at home recently, so it's a lot about expectations. These are two teams that are probably in the upper echelon right now of NFC teams, which is funny to say about Dallas because they haven't played to the level that they could. But I want to see how that secondary performs. This is a read for teams that could potentially match up against each other in the playoffs. So we get an early preview of that. And I want to see how Dak plays. Dak is always that polarizing piece of Dallas. Everybody is either on the Dak hype train or on the Dak hate train. But this is a game in the regular season. He needs to have a good game for his own sake. I want to see if he can get it done, or if that second. Honestly, the secondary for Detroit's had some moments of good and some moments of bad. I mean, Terry and Arnold, one of the guy who I picked as my defensive rookie of the year, he's really struggled with the personal fouls lately. So if Dallas's receivers can get in his head early, they might be able to win that with some penalties.
Yeah, I am not. If I am the Lions defensive coordinator, I am not matching Terry and Arnold against CD Lamb. I'm going to try to stay away from that because Terry and Arnold is Mr. Krabs. He is grabby as hell. He's gotten 3 PIs in one game, I think. And it comes with experience. He's still going to be a very good corner. But he's been too physical for what the game is. And that comes with rule changes as well. They call more PIs in the NFL and stuff like that. But yeah, this just smells, it stinks of a Cowboys come out and just blast the Lions and then go back to being the Cowboys. They look superhuman and then they go back to being mid as soon as that happens. I could see that happening. Did you say who you think's gonna win?
Oh, I did not. Sorry. I don't. I think ultimately, I think the Lions will just squeak by. I think it'll be close. Playing at Dallas is never easy, but I don't think Dak will get it done. I think he'll have a bad game. Again, his stats were confusing last week. He threw for like 350 yards, but he also had two picks. So it's
Yeah.
kind of like I can't get a read on him. I never could. But I think Jared Goff coming off the last performance before the bye, throwing a perfect game. I think he'll continue to be hot. I think they get their get back from last season, and I think they win. So this has been Sideline Signal. I'm Andrew, as always, joined by Tyler. Thank you for once again listening. If you like our content, make sure to subscribe. A lot of our viewers aren't subscribed, so make sure to do that if you're listening in. We are also on TikTok at Sideline Signal. We post a lot of weekly content on that more consistently than we do on here. So make sure to follow and interact with us. We love reading comments. We love interacting. But yeah. Thank you so much, as always, and we will be back again next week covering the college and NFL games. Thank you all.